everyone, welcome back to another week of the Triple Play. This is your host Danielle, and today I am joined by David and Morgan, and I'm trying to sound more optimistic than most people here on campus are, especially with the news of Peyton Manning's retirement. Cue all of the tears of all of Vol Nation, all of Broncos country, and some Colts fans, probably most Colts fans. But before we talk about Peyton, because let's be honest, that's going to take up a good chunk of the show, let's just go to basketball first and get all of that out of the way, and then we all can be sad together. So the Lady Vols have finished up the SEC tournament, and they made a pretty surprising run, if I do say so myself. I don't think many people expected them to get to the semifinals like they did. Very surprising, but let's talk about the road to that point first. They ended up beating Arkansas on Thursday night, went on to play Texas A&M on Friday, which was pretty much the turning point. I don't think anybody expected them to make it to that game and beat the number 2 seed Aggies. Just completely surprising. And then they went on to lose to Mississippi State in the semifinals, like I said. But let's just talk about this win over the Aggies, because like I said, it was the most surprising. The Lady Vols went in as the 7th seed, and they took on the 2nd seeded Aggies, like I said, and they beat them 70-60 on Friday night. Two players I really want to highlight in these stats: Diamond DeShields and Bashara Graves. DeShields had 21 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, while Graves had 19.7 rebounds and 2 assists. Lady Vols were out-rebounded 19-9, but they made up for that at the line, shooting 22 for 24 on free throws. So obviously this was a really good performance from the Lady Vols. They capitalized on all of A&M's fouling troubles. They had 22 fouls. That's unheard of pretty much for this Aggies team. But did you expect this kind of win to happen from this Lady Vols team?
I don't know if I expected it, but I do think that they found a recipe to winning from this point on, finding success in the tournament. Watching this team in the SEC tournament looked a lot like watching Bruce Pearl teams of old, especially with Diamond at the top of that press, which was something we hadn't really seen all year, and I think it's something that they can use moving forward.
Mm-hmm. You know, I just got one thing to say about Lady Vols. Shine bright like a diamond, okay? Diamond DeShields, I'm telling you, she was fantastic. Okay? She was fantastic.
She was.
Okay, you read her scouting report like when she was in high school, and you know all the skills that she had, and it wasn't really translating at UT because people thought she wasn't like being a part of the game plan. But in the tournament, especially against Texas A&M, she was making great decisions. Her ball handling was excellent. She wasn't taking bad shots. It felt like a group effort, and that's why they beat Texas A&M, a team that they almost beat in the regular season. But in the SEC tournament, they finally played like a team.
I agree, and I mean, looking back whenever they played, I want to say it was Ole Miss. Diamond DeShields struggled in that game from what I remember. She had no points in that. And it's just nice to see her finally making the turnaround that was desperately needed for this team, because, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. She's the backbone of the team, to be honest. She is definitely one of the strongest, if not the strongest player the Lady Vols have. So if they want to do well getting into the NCAA tournament, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, they're really going to need to focus on her having games like this, like she did against A&M.
I covered that Ole Miss game. I was there. She did not score a single point, and she turned the ball over multiple times. She really struggled, and it was against an Ole Miss team that was not very good. I believe they're last in the conference, or were last at in the conference at the time. But, I mean, seeing her out on the court, she looks like she's the best player out there physically. She looks like she should be dominating. And when used correctly, as I think she was in the SEC tournament, the Lady Vols look like the team that they've looked like the last forever. I mean, really. Obviously, we had the streak of being ranked broken this year, so it's safe to say pretty much forever. And it's great. I mean, it's tough when she transfers from another program. I mean, people immediately expect immediate results. But that's not reasonable to expect. Teams need time to gel. Players need time to gel with new players. And I think they were sort of trying to figure out where she fit, and I think they might have stumbled upon it. Credit to Holly for putting that in the game plan.
I will say, though, that the game against Mississippi State on offense was a little troubling because they kind of fell back into all of the things that had kind of like hindered their season. They weren't moving the ball. they weren't running their plays until like half of the shot clock was gone.
Right.
So it kind of seemed like a return to the old Tennessee team from earlier in the year, but hopefully they make those adjustments and they stick with it through the tournament.
Definitely. It's like once they finally find momentum, they just drop it completely. Once there's like a chip on their shoulder, they just knock the chip off. It's not going to stay for a while. But hopefully they'll take what they learned from this tournament and really take that into the NCAA tournament. So we're going to go ahead and shift our focus over to that. The Lady Vols right now are 19-13 on the season. They've obviously struggled this season, like we've talked about multiple times on the show. But where do you see them being placed in the NCAA tournament?
I think the projections are a 6 seed, 7 seed in that range, which I mean is stunning for this program. The thing is they have maybe the talent to make somewhat of a run, but I think fans should keep their expectations low. Yeah. And especially with like the upper echelon teams like UConn, Notre Dame, Baylor, I don't see this team beating any of those teams in the tournament. Or even South Carolina in the SEC. No. I don't see them beating them. But, I mean, it would be a nice storyline if the Lady Vols could just find a way, storied program kind of falling down and then maybe making a run to the Final Four. That'd be fantastic.
I'm a huge fan of drawing comparisons. And, I don't know, maybe look back a few years ago with the Lady Vols don't really struggle like this, so we have to look to the men's side. A third-year coach, a really talented team, an ugly loss in the SEC tournament after it looked like they were finally building some momentum. And they went in that NCAA tournament and they went to the Sweet 16, which I don't think is beyond reach for the Lady Vols, considering especially if they are a 6 seed, they are almost guaranteed a win against whoever they play in the first round. And I think it actually sets up better for them than if they were a 1 or a 2. Just because, I mean, they're not going to be playing really bad teams to where you're going to get a letdown, but they're not going to be playing elite teams. They're going to be playing middle-of-the-road, mid-major teams for the first couple games. So I think it sets up really well for the Lady Vols to make a run, possibly, especially with the talent they have. There's a reason that they were preseason ranked number 3.
I agree with that. But, I mean, just looking, I mean, like you said, David, the projections right now are 6 or 7. I think, realistically, probably a 7. That's probably the easiest way to go. Getting a 5 would be magical, to be honest, getting that 5th seed, but that's going to be pretty much unlikely at this point. But who knows, maybe the selection committee will look at the SEC tournament, see how well they did, taking away the Mississippi State game because it was just like they fell back into their old ways. But there's a lot that could be said for this team despite the struggles. There have been high points. They've just been tough to see. That's one way of looking at it. But if they could get the 6th seed, that would be great. 5th would be magical, but I think realistically 7th seed is what's looking most likely. But the selection show will be happening on Monday the 14th at 7 p.m. So that's next Monday. And we won't be able to cover that because spring break is next week. So next week the show will be off, but I'll remind you of that towards the end. But let's go ahead and shift over to the men and talk about their season. The season has now wrapped up, the regular season that is. They're getting ready to go into the SEC tournament. But they finished their regular season with 4 straight losses. That is not easy to think about. But their last game was at home, and they lost to Ole Miss on senior day, 83-60. Tennessee was pretty much favored in that game. I mean, this gave Ole Miss their 20th win, but with the way Tennessee has played at home, they definitely should have won that, especially on senior day. But things just did not work out. But we could highlight that game. We could highlight any of the last 4 losses they took, but let's just talk about the season and where they stand right now. This Tennessee team is 13-18, 12th in the SEC. They're going to have that 12th seed going into the tournament. How do you summarize this season in one word for the Vols?
Kevin Punter.
That's 2 words, but that'll work.
Kevin Punter.
Math. There's a reason I'm a sports journalist major, not a math major. But so just punter then?
That could work.
That sums up
there
the
you
football
go.
team.
You say it
too.
really fast.
That's work.
Kevin Punter.
That could work too, yeah.
Punter. I mean, we are punter you. But the season started with obviously his tremendous scoring ability and the way he really just, I mean, it's been mentioned a million times, changed his shot. He just did whatever was necessary to do for this team. And I think that really sums up this senior class too. They deserve the respect of all nation. They may not have been a part of the most memorable teams in Tennessee history. maybe memorable for the wrong reasons. But they stuck with it. They stuck with this program through thick and thin. They truly all are Vols for life. They are everything that you want out of young men, and they played their hearts out. Even in that last game, tremendous effort. Just the talent's not there on the court, and hopefully that'll change soon. Rick's got some players coming in. Lamont Turner couldn't play this year, which is unfortunate because I think he would have been a real difference maker. It would have allowed KP to play off the ball and really played to our strengths a bit more. But I'm looking forward to see what Rick Barnes can do with future teams. But this year was all about that senior class and the effort they put in.
My word is undersized. Just completely undersized team.
Yeah.
I don't think the expectations going in were that high. So it shouldn't really be too much of a shock with the record. And then they had injuries at the end, and it's a first-year head coach. The basketball program's kind of been down for the last couple of seasons, so there's really not much to say. It's just a building process. They had the high moments at home. They just need to learn how to win on the road, and that'll come with more experience with the younger players.
Definitely. I think the word I would go with is promising, because if you see them doing as well as they did at home, everybody's just waiting for them to find the translation point where that can work on the road as well. It's going to happen, but you also, in times of adversity, you had other players step up like they needed to. We saw that with Armani Moore within the, I want to say it was, which game was it? It was just a few back. I want to say it was around South Carolina or Arkansas. He stepped up and really played hard. So, I mean, this team is promising despite the record. And, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, David. They were completely undersized going into this season. It was tough to find who was going to be a leader besides punter. So I'm going to stick with promising. I think especially with Rick Barnes at the helm, there's a lot that can be said for this team in the future, and we can see what's going to happen to them as they keep going. But they are going to be taking on Auburn this Wednesday in the first round of the SEC tournament. Auburn is the 13th seed. Tennessee is the 12th seed. How do you see that game playing out for the Vols, considering they split the meetings this season with the Tigers?
I'm just going to keep this short and quick. I think Tennessee loses. I think the team is just running out of gas.
I think Auburn's the only team in the SEC playing worse right now than Tennessee, so I think they stay alive for another day.
Split decision. Impressive.
Split indecision, actually.
That's also very true. I would say it's going to be an evenly matched game going into it. I mean, both teams are struggling. And both games this season between the two, I mean, if you look at the final scores, the first time they met up, whenever the Tigers took that win 83-77, and then the Vols took the second one 71-45, they're pretty much substantial wins for either team, but they're substantial losses for the losing team. I know that's a really, obvious thing to say, but you have to think about it with these two teams. They could go either way on their games, and we saw that with Tennessee especially. They could just dominate at home and then fall apart on the road. So if I'm going to pick a team, I'd want to say Tennessee could find a turning point and win it, but it's just going to be tough. I mean, like you said, David, I think they're losing their fuel. It's tough to see.
But also remember, Kareem Cansey left the team.
That's also true.
They're without their Kevin Punter, essentially. So
right. Which is why, I mean, that goes back to how I said it's going to be evenly matched. So it's
they could both lose the game.
That's true. Just everybody loses. Yeah. Everybody loses. I think that'd be a first time in SEC history. Probably just NCAA basketball history. I don't think there's ever been a game where two teams lost. That'd be very impressive. That's going to be the homework for the week, to look up if that's ever happened.
Technically, the 2008 Memphis season, two teams lost every game, except for the Tennessee game and the Kansas game.
That's true. They all their wins vacated.
That is true. Despite having wins vacated, we'll see if that's ever happened. Probably not.
Probably not.
But like I said, they're going to be taking on Auburn this Wednesday at 8 o'clock on the SEC Network. So be sure to tune in to see what happens with the men Vols, and we'll see if they make it to Selection Sunday come next Sunday. Probably not, but we'll keep the hope alive. So let's go ahead and talk about Tennessee baseball really quick. They are 7-3 on the season right now. It's a pretty good start for Tennessee baseball, considering how they've kind of been up and down recently. But this weekend, they went to the Keith LeClaire Classic in Greenville, North Carolina, and they took a record of 1-2 on the series. They got a win over Eastern Carolina. But one thing I want to note, despite their two losses, they were very close losses, which I think is something that's pretty important for this Vols team. Their losses this season have been fairly close, despite their loss to Memphis back on February 20th, which was 13-8. But they lost to Maryland this weekend 10-9 and Southeastern Louisiana 5-4. So I think that's a little bit of it's a bright spot, I would say. I mean, they haven't played anybody big yet. They're going to be starting SEC play on the 18th whenever they host Ole Miss here in Knoxville. But looking at this Classic this weekend, is there anything that stands out to you about this Vols team?
They've been lighting up the scoreboard, scoring a lot of runs, 2 20-run games. I'm just concerned that this team only has one solid pitcher, Zach Warren. I mean, the dude's been amazing this season.
He's been great.
3-0, 17 strikeouts in 16 innings. But their team ERA is over 4.
That's true.
And you can score all the runs you want, but at the end of the day, the most important thing in baseball is pitching. So if they can't find a way to get other pitchers going, then they can score all the runs they want. They can average 4 or 5 runs per game like they've been doing in the recent games. But if their pitching always allows 6, 7 runs, then it's all for naught. So they need to find a way to get a solid number 2 pitcher and number 3 pitcher.
I completely agree with you. You can't win in this conference without pitching. But what stood out to me over the weekend was, one, their win over East Carolina was rather impressive. I mean, East Carolina's 16th ranked team in the country. And number 2, they showed a lot of heart, especially in that Maryland game where they were down, I believe, at 1.8-3. They came back to tie that game before Maryland regained the lead in the last 2 innings. But tremendous amount of heart. If this team can show that amount of fight and conference play, this is a team that's going to be a major player, and especially if they can find a solid number 2 option.
Definitely. I mean, just looking at Zach Warren in that Eastern Carolina game, he pitched 6 2/3 innings, allowing 8 hits, 2 runs, 2 errors, and 3 walks, but he had 7 strikeouts. And I mean, that's 7 strikeouts. That's very impressive for him. And I want to say he's only a sophomore. So there's a lot of potential with him. He can grow even more, and that's going to be exciting to look at. But their next game is going to be against Western Carolina, and that will be Tuesday at 6 p.m., and that's here in Knoxville. So be sure you go check that out. And let's go ahead and look over at softball really quick. They hosted the Tennessee Invitational, and they won it this weekend. They swept all of their games, but that's no surprise for the Tennessee Invitational for Tennessee softball. But all of the games that they won, and this is really impressive, all ended in 5 innings. Every single one.
Except for the last one.
Except for the last one. So, I mean, that was like St. John's, though. Championship game, you don't really expect a championship game to, go into a shortened game. But this is impressive. This is very impressive for Tennessee softball. And right now, they are 16-5 on the season. They have had some tough losses. But I think this Invitational could turn things around for them.
Well, yes, because they gave their freshman pitchers experience, Maddie Moss, Bria Bush. But they play in the SEC, and
That's
softball, the SEC is just a bloodbath. It's crazy. And I'm concerned on how Moss and Bush will perform in the SEC because, especially with Bush, she's a location pitcher.
Yeah.
And that was her scouting report coming in. And against Green Bay or UAB, she was struggling a bit, finding the zone, strike zone. And that will work against teams like that, but it won't work against teams like Florida or Alabama. And they're still making some mental errors in the field. I know in the last game, the second baseman, she didn't have her foot on the bag when a St. John's runner was trying to get on, and so it was safe. And just little things like that. Against these opponents, you can get away with it. But the coaches were saying after the game that these little things are the reasons why we're losing these games by 1 run, because we're making these mental mistakes. And they're not going to get away with it, but their bats definitely came to life over the weekend.
Definitely.
Lexi Overstreet was fantastic. I think she drove in 10 runs over the course of 5 games. And they hit a couple grand slams in the first game. So overall, an impressive weekend, but we need to see how their freshman pitchers will react to SEC competition.
Well, we already saw Maddie Moss play against Alabama. I was really impressed. The problem was, obviously, you let the lead slip late, but she's a freshman. That's her first game against elite competition. That was the biggest thing for me this weekend, was see how the team responded to that loss to Alabama. Just absolutely gut-wrenching. It was gut-wrenching to watch because you could kind of feel it in the air. I know I did when I was watching it. I just sort of felt like Alabama had it. But Alabama is an elite team. That is one of the top teams Tennessee's going to play. And I think it was very important that they play that game. And I think it's important that they show that they could respond to that. It shows a lot of maturity from young players in order to do that. And I think this can only help them as they launch into conference play.
Definitely. And looking back at that Alabama game, it was gut-wrenching, but you have to take in the fact that Alabama was number 4. So the loss was kind of expected, but for it to be that close, that's definitely what made it hurt, because it was in the hands of the Vols.
But that game, I was also impressed. I didn't walk away really disappointed, though, because they went down 3 runs to nothing down early, and they responded, and they came back. That was the first or second inning. All the damage that Alabama did, except for the damage they did in that last inning. So once again, maturity by younger players. That's going to be the theme for this season.
Yeah, they have 11 freshmen on this team.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know Karen said before the season that we're going to lose a few more games than our fans expect. But they're going to throw the freshmen out and give them that experience. And they've responded well overall. They had a similar situation against Arizona State where they had to come back, and they had that game. But then there was like a mishandled ball in the extra innings, and that just cost them the game. So I don't know if in the field they've corrected all the little like mental errors, because there was also another instance where the third baseman, Logan Lilly, a ball went through her legs and someone got on base. You can get away with it against Green Bay at UAB, but not against Florida, Alabama, most of the time.
Most of the time. That's the key. The next game for Tennessee softball will be taking place Tuesday the 8th against Belmont, and that's in Columbia, Tennessee. That should be a pretty exciting matchup for Tennessee, but they will be starting SEC play this weekend, starting on the 11th whenever they host Arkansas here in Knoxville, and that game will be at 6 p.m. So that should be really exciting to finally get into SEC play, but it's a bloodbath, like you said. It's a bloodbath whenever you get to SEC play. But let's go ahead and talk about what everyone is talking about. The tears are forming. It's all becoming real. Football without Peyton Manning is a reality. It's almost as sad as whenever there was baseball without Derek Jeter. That's where I'm comparing it, because Derek Jeter was a legend in my mind. Peyton's everything. Let's just be honest. So first off, to start out this talk about Peyton, 18 seasons in the league. And as he said in his press conference today, 18 is a great number. 16 might be better if you're a Tennessee fan, but 18, of course, is a good number. How do you... See, I'm already getting choked up talking about him. How do you talk about Peyton's legacy? Where do you start with his legacy? It's impossible to.
It's bigger than just the numbers. You know, you can look at all the stats and all the records, but the reason why he got those records is because he basically went to teams, and even though they had offensive coordinators, he was the brain. He was the engine behind everything.
Of course.
And even when he didn't have the greatest, like offensive line blocking him, even when there was a lack of a running game at times, Peyton always found a way, no matter the situation, to get the Colts or the Broncos into the postseason. And just, his preparation and his, IQ is unparalleled. And I think when he entered the league, passing was not what it is today. Like, they were not putting up the numbers that quarterbacks are putting up now, but he kind of revolutionized that. People started taking things from him, and quarterbacks learn so much from a guy like Peyton. And now you look at the league, and it's just a completely passing league. So Peyton Manning, he's more than just the numbers. It's what he did for franchises. Indianapolis was down in the dumps.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing really. Denver, I mean, they had the the miracle run with Tim Tebow, but nobody thought that would last. People were still kind of iffy on what Denver was going to do, and he helped them turn around in 2 Super Bowl appearances in 4 seasons, Super Bowl victory. So, and the ability to bounce back from the 4 neck surgeries.
Yeah.
And I mean, have the first 2 seasons of Denver, arguably the 2 best seasons of his career. You could tell he loved the game. He worked hard. He's everything you want in a quarterback. And so, Peyton's the reason why I started watching sports. So it's tough to see him go, but hopefully he sticks around with football analyst or something like that. But a legend, first ballot Hall of Famer. He should get every vote, and if he doesn't, I don't know what to say. But
it'll be a sad day if he doesn't.
Yeah, but legend in every aspect.
To reinforce your point, back in 2004 when Peyton had one of his greatest seasons, I believe the only quarterbacks to throw for 4,000 yards that year were Dante Culpepper, Trent Green, and Peyton Manning. but he revolutionized the game. They're saying that Jim Kelly originated the no-Huddle offense in the NFL, but Peyton Manning perfected it. Mm-hmm. I think that might have been a quote directly from Jim Kelly himself, who was sort of the first man to really run that. Not many quarterbacks have had the cerebral capability to run the no-Huddle. You said he was the offensive coordinator. I always thought him as the co-offensive coordinator because the tremendous amount of respect he had for Tom Moore there and Adam Gase in Denver.
That is true. Tremendous
play callers. And you combine them with Peyton, and you have an offensive juggernaut. Mm-hmm. He really was the ultimate competitor, the ultimate teammate. He made the players around him better, and he made the coaches around him better. First, the only quarterback to ever take 4 different coaches to Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. I mean, and look at a couple of those guys. One's Gary Kubiak, and one's Jim Caldwell. Yeah. Yeah. No knock against Jim Caldwell or Gary Kubiak. Great guys, great coaches. But to be fair, Peyton didn't really carry him to that last one. But I mean, it's impressive that all the different things he's done, all the things that will not go down in stats, all the his face around this city, around this country. Mm-hmm. It's really a testament to what a professional athlete should be, a consummate pro. Great face for advertising and a great person in the community. He has done stuff for people that nobody talks about. He makes sure the media doesn't find out about any of it. But he's just been incredible for every community he's lived in and for this country and for professional sports, in my opinion.
I agree with that. And it's crazy to just think about how one man can change the face of a sport in just a certain amount of time. That's just how I look at Peyton, because, I mean, for a lot of college students, a lot of people in general, football without Peyton is unheard of. Like, football has been Peyton and Peyton has been football. That's the only way to look at it. And I was walking to the podcast today, and I got stopped by somebody. They were walking in front of me, and they stopped to take a picture of Peyton Manning on the side of Neyland Stadium. And I teared up a little bit looking at it. I'm like, this is what it's going to be for the next who knows how many years. It's going to be amazing. And it's just, I just go back to football is Peyton, Peyton is football. That's just how life has been. I mean, this guy, 539 passing touchdowns. I'm just going to go through some stats really quick. I know he's more than the stats, but you can't help but to not talk about them. 56 game-winning drives, the most in league history, 8 more than Tom Brady. Just want to throw that one out there. 5 MVP awards. That's the most of any player. Brett Favre and Johnny Unitas, they both won 3 each. Other things, 14 postseason wins. He's third on the all-times list behind Brady and Montana. So people always ragged on him for failing in the postseason, but it maybe in like clutch situations people would say it, but he's just one of the greatest. I mean, he's the GOAT. He's Peyton Manning. There's no other way that you can just talk about football without Peyton. It's just going to be so tough going into this season. I'm at a loss for words. I don't know what to do with this now. This is very tough.
I will just add that you said he's the GOAT. I still think Tom Brady is the GOAT, but sorry to put a little sour note.
Ban you from the podcast. I moved that Danielle ban you from the podcast.
But the thing about, like, I mean, the Peyton Manning Tom Brady rivalry,
it's going to be missed.
It's going to be like, I mean, I'm pretty sure Tom Brady's sad too. The players are sad that Peyton's gone. Like, fun to play against.
Yeah.
And I think one stat that stands out about Peyton is the 5 MVPs. Yeah. Because he honestly could have probably won more. Then his value was more important than how many touchdowns he threw. He was a great leader. Yeah.
And I think now the question is, when will Canton happen? I mean, you look at Jerome Bettis, it took him 10 years. It's he'll be first ballot easily.
The real question is, when is the statue going up of Peyton, outside or in Neyland?
That's true.
Yeah.
Let's put the over under 1.5 years.
He could honestly have 3 statues: Denver, Indianapolis, Knoxville.
And he might. Yeah. You never know. It could happen. I mean, he's Peyton Manning. Anything can happen.
And we're not Alabama or Florida. We don't put a statue up for just anything.
Yeah.
No, we wait. And I mean, it's just the University of Tennessee today, just walking around, it was a very, very different feel. And it's all because of Peyton. And I think that's just how football is. Whenever you are a fan of football, no matter who your team is, Peyton Manning changed you in some sort of way. That's just how he is. And that's where we're going to end the show today. with Peyton Manning going out, riding into the sunset as now a future Hall of Famer. There's no other way to look at it. It's going to happen soon. But thank you for joining us this week on the Triple Play. We will see you in 2 weeks. Spring break is next week, so no show. But enjoy Selection Sunday, Selection Monday. Get excited for the NCAA tournament. And we will see you in 2 weeks here on the Triple Play.